Welcome to the Sober Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Brickhouse, and I'm excited because our sober celebrity today is Caitlin Avery, and she was with us earlier this year. She is an accomplished author of several books, including Last Cruz, Grief and Grace, her coming of age memoir, Lightning in My Wires, and her latest novel, Life of Sin. That's CYN. You got to go out and get it. And as I said, this is Caitlin's second time being on the show. We loved her interview so much last time, and we didn't get to nearly all the issues we needed to. And I'm sure we won't today because we're going to focus one in particular. We wanted to dive deeper into her personal story and discuss a topic that should get a lot more attention: healing from sexual assault. And so our topic today is how I healed from sexual assault in sobriety. Thank you for joining us again on Sober Podcast, Caitlin.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be back.
There are many in sobriety that struggle with sexual assault, abuse, trauma. What abuse did you experience?
So my abuse definitely has a correlation to my alcoholism. I was assaulted at the age of 17. It was not a date rape. It was aggravated assault. It was at a party. At that time, I wasn't drinking out of control. In general, I was drinking like most teenage kids. I had had less than 2 drinks and may or may not have been roofied. I have never been able to prove any of that, but
really?
Yeah, there's no way to prove it. And I didn't even have knowledge about it at the time. So I just know that I was completely gonzo, blacked out after about a drink and a half. And I was assaulted. And a year almost to the date later, I wound up getting sober. So I went from being like a fairly normal, I was a wicked jock. I played 3 varsity sports. I was super involved in school, and I just completely tanked my senior year with, basically blackout drinking all the time, drinking multiple times a week. And before I even set foot on my college campus, I got sober.
Wow. Do you feel like the assault influenced your getting sober or your ability to get sober? How do you think
I don't know. I don't think it influenced my ability to get sober whatsoever. It was the cause of my crash and burn. Now, I do not blame alcoholism on my assault. It's correlation. It's not causation.
Right.
So, I would have been an alcoholic no matter what, because I've been in and out, and it's pretty clear to me that I need to be in. But I definitely crashed and burned with drinking and drugs because my senior year, I could not deal with my feelings around the assault, and I just needed to be gonzo, like as often as possible. I wanted to check out. So
the assault certainly fueled your alcoholism. That was already there, right?
100%. I don't think I would have nosedived like I did at that time so early if not for the assault.
And what can you tell us about the assault? Do you remember the actual thing, or you came to and it had and you knew something had happened?
Yeah, so this is
and how much you want to talk about, that's all.
Yeah, I'm totally cool talking about it. It's actually completely covered in my memoir, so it's not the first time that I've divulged details.
Yep.
So basically what happened was it was daylight at a party, and I had had a drink and a half or so. And that's the last thing I remember, was talking to someone on the porch. And the next thing I know, I have no idea how much time had passed, but I woke up in the middle of being assaulted. It was brief at that time. I woke up with enough coherence to understand what was happening and that I had not joined in, freely.
Right.
And then I blacked out again. So all I know is that I then woke up sometime later, and it was dark out, and I was in a tree. So it was outside in a rural area, and I had climbed up into a tree in some sort of trauma response. And I was hiding, essentially. And I got down out of the tree and came back into the party and was literally out of my head. I basically knew that something terrible had happened to me. And I came back in, and I actually picked up a knife and started trying to cut on myself. And my dear friend took the, basically saw what I was doing and took the knife away and said, you need to go sleep it off. Like you got to go find some place to put your head down and obviously just get out of your wasted state. He had no idea what had occurred. He
Right,
just
right.
assumed I was like really messed up. And but I was not that messed up. Like, I knew what was going on. I wasn't like wasted anymore. I kind of had come to from
Mhm,
that
mhm.
event. So anyway, I went upstairs and I had this weird memory of seeing a bunch of guys at the top of the stairs kind of snickering and doing this whole like egging each other on, almost like laughing at me as I came upstairs. And I went and found an empty room and went into the room to lay down. And almost within seconds, I lay down and somebody came in the room and it was another guy and he assaulted me. So, and in that case, I was wide awake. I was no longer in any kind of blackout stage. I think many hours had passed. And because again, I was blacked out for a while. I don't know how much time passed, but
Yeah.
I was basically had all my wits enough about me to fight him off physically and verbally, and it didn't work. So I really believe I was preyed upon by a group,
Yeah.
potentially. If
Sounds
not a group, then it was two. But I've done a lot of like investigating throughout the years about different aspects of this. And the one guy who I tried to fight off, he was home from Ohio State that summer. He was in college already. And Ohio State at that exact time had a terrible problem with roofies
Mhm.
and
And you were
date
in high school, is that
I
correct?
was in high school. Yeah, it was a statutory situation. He was older. Ohio State had a very bad situation going on with roofies and date rapes, and it was covered up. And there was like this whole. Eventually, it came out, and they really had to, make some amends to victims on their campus who had reported crimes that then weren't really dealt with. Anyway, bottom line is I don't know, but I think I was roofied because there are just all kinds of signs that point to that. And it seemed as though I was preyed upon and then
Mhm.
drugged in order to be captured or whatever you want to call it.
Wow, harrowing. What and when did you start your healing process from that? And I know that's probably a multi-layered question, right?
Yeah. It's been since day one. So here's the good news about this. There was never any confusion in my mind about whether it was my fault. Like it was what was done to me was completely wrong. And I knew that immediately. So the
Hmm.
next day I told three people. I told my best friend, I told my boyfriend at the time, and I told a coworker because I was at work and I couldn't pull myself together. I was crying a lot and I was in the bathroom. And so they inquired and I told them what happened. So right from the get-go, I made a statement that this had happened to me. I was not a participant, and it was terrible what had happened.
One other
Um,
question, just a detailed question. Were you living at home with your parents or were you at a boarding school? Were
oh
you?
no, I was at home. Yeah, I was at home. I was not supposed to be at that party. And in fact, the next morning I came home and my parents had tried to locate me the night before. I was supposedly sleeping over at a friend's house. So the
Mhm.
gig was up. They caught me having been at the party, but obviously they had no idea what went down. And so I also got grounded when I walked in the door. They took away my car, they took away my everything, my
Right.
freedoms. And yeah, I had to bike around town that day because I had to go first to my cheerleading practice and then I had to bike to work after this assault. It was by far the most traumatic, devastating day of my life. It was horrific. But as you can see, like I can fully talk about this and the terribleness of it without I have no emotional response to it because I have talked and talked and talked about it and written about it. So
Mhm.
from day one, I told people what happened. I never told my parents or the authorities. Then fast forward many years later, I wrote a memoir, and the memoir is the story of my search for love and enlightenment. But in the story, I basically address this trauma experience that I had when I was younger. So
It-
I detailed that in writing. I wrote basically the exact story of what happened.
the memoir being Lightning in My Wires.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So the story is in there. And that was the first time that I outed myself as being a victim, to the general public. I know not a ton of people were reading my memoir, but basically, I basically put it out there. I didn't I exposed all the secrets, these dark, terrible secrets of mine. Including to my parents. So that was the first time my parents ever found out about my assault. And they read the memoir before it was published. I basically gave them a heads up. But it was
This
pretty.
was obviously many years later,
It
So,
was. I was about to publish it in 2010, and the assault happened in 1990.
yeah.
So
They're
it was
quite
many years later that I published the memoir. Yeah.
wow. How has your sobriety and I know that you have had what is it, three periods of sobriety? You got
Yeah.
sober in college and then you were not sober for a while, et cetera. But like many of us. And how has your sobriety helped you?
Oh, this is where it gets really crazy. Okay, so my third bout of sobriety is my most recent. I have 8.5 years, and 8.5 years ago, my mother was dying of cancer when I was in very early sobriety. Um, it was an utterly chaotic and terrible time in my early sobriety, filled with emotion and complicated stuff. Life was getting very lifey. So as a result, having done the program before and knowing that I needed to try as many things as I could to stay sober and sane, I
Mhm.
basically took every recommendation and just ran with it. I just decided I was going to try everything. If I didn't like it or if it wasn't helpful, then I wouldn't necessarily stick to it. But very quickly I jumped into the steps. Okay. And my intention was I needed to get far enough into the steps through the fourth step so that I could make amends to my mom because she was going, like, I was running out of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there was sort of a rush to some degree, but I had done the fourth step before, so I knew what it was about. And I just got down, and obviously I like to write, so that wasn't an issue. So I just got to writing, right? And so shortly, I don't know, sometime after my mother passed, and I finally found myself sort of ready to work again, I called my sponsor and said, I'm ready to do the fifth step with you. And she said, Oh, I'm really sorry, but I'm dropping out of the program.
Oh God.
Which wasn't shocking to me. I mean, I had done it. So I was like, all
Right.
right, well, good luck. I'm going to find somebody else. And I just basically went to somebody in one of my meetings, like right away. I needed somebody. I was like, are you willing to listen to my fifth step? So I went through the fifth step. And the one thing that I got very hung up on in terms of understanding the whole turnaround is the assault. I was like, all right, I get it. Here are my resentments. Pretty clear. All right.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
how am I supposed to look at my part in this? It makes me so furious to contemplate that I have to admit some guilt or fault or mistake. It's not acceptable. I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken here. But my sponsor was wonderful, and she got to digging about where I had guilt over it. Now this was I
Right.
had real guilt because it turned out that I had learned of other victims
Hmm.
of the same guy. It gets complicated, but the guy who I remember raping me, like the one who I was there fighting and saying no and whatever, he had actually assaulted other people to my knowledge.
Yeah.
So I felt terrible guilt because I did not do anything to get him in trouble. And there, I wondered if I had, would he have not been able to assault others? So one of my amends was to actually out my rapist on Facebook with the intention of validating the other victims. This was not my sponsor's idea. Okay, she didn't plant this in my head. But during my process of making amends for all different kinds of things,
Right.
I
Right.
made amends to the other victims in a pretty non-conventional way.
Oh, great. Wait, I want to hear more about that. And we're going to have a quick little break. But before we do, what I would just add my 2 cents about when you're doing step 4 and 5 and looking at the resentments or looking at incidents and say, what's your part in it? I don't necessarily mean, I think what I realize now is it doesn't necessarily mean you were at fault or you were mistake or you made a mistake. It was, what is your part? What is your part in that event or in that situation or that relationship, which I think is it. And I'm kind of just having that epiphany right now, actually, as you were talking. It's not like I've always known this or have thought this, but anyway, that's my 2 cents about that, which is a good way. I think a helpful way for everyone to look at it. And you're like, oh, okay, it's not me. It doesn't mean I was at fault in this
Mm,
or did something wrong. It's just what was my part in it.
right.
Anyway, we're gonna stop for a quick commercial break.
Hi, I'm Sonia, the founder of Everbloom. We help you change your relationship with alcohol through connection and conversation. We provide small group meetings where you can share your story and get the encouragement and support you need to achieve your goals. Whatever your goals are, we're a judgment-free space. You can find us at joineverbloom.com, BLUME, and try us out with a free meeting.
And we are back talking to Caitlin Avery. So you were talking about how you made amends to the other, when you realized that there were other sexual assault victims by the same guy, and you made amends by outing him. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it happened relatively quickly after the Stanford rape case happened in this country. Kid got caught raping somebody behind a dumpster. He was a Stanford student. There was all kinds of evidence. There were witnesses. The cops were called. It seemed like everything aligned to send him to prison. But on the day of the sentencing, he was found guilty, but the judge decided that it was inappropriate to wreck this kid's life over one mistake that he made. So he only got 6 months. He got 6 months in prison, and then he got out after 3. And when he got out of prison, I was flipping my lid. I thought, if the law, when everything comes together perfectly, when the law doesn't protect us, what are we supposed to do? Like, what I had been thinking for years, what I could do, and it had gone all over the map, right?
Yeah,
I had thought, with friends, whether or not I could find somebody to beat him up, like all kinds of stuff. And so basically, I pretty quickly decided, all right, one thing that I can do is tell people. I've been telling people for a long time behind the scenes, behind closed doors. I always told people what the story was and his name and everything. So I decided I was going to do it on Facebook, but because it was before Me Too, I was afraid to use his full name, so I used initials. And I posted basically a brief paragraph saying, I know the Stanford rape case is shocking to everyone. Well, I was that woman. And I just want to say that this guy from our high school has done it to more than just me. And so his initials are KG. And, I just want to let everybody know that if it happened to you, you're not alone, whatever. I basically put a pretty brief statement up. And within 24 hours, I had learned of 7 other victims, which brought the total of my knowledge to 10 victims. And it happened so fast, like wildfire.
amazing.
Yeah. So bottom line is, there was all kinds of talk about what we could do, to like what should be done about him. And it was all legal stuff, like let's hold a protest, or let's I was contacted by a reporter from local news, the New England cable network contacted me. And because I always say, because it was before Me Too, I had no exposure to anyone doing anything like this, and I was very terrified about being sued. Like, I was afraid I could
Right.
In fact, he's a very successful businessman in the town that's next door to mine. So I was afraid he had the money to like maybe come after me, and it could get really bad for me financially.
Yeah.
So bottom line is, I basically made a couple statements on Facebook to update people saying, oh, now I know of this many victims now. And another victim ended up writing and publishing a blog about her experience with him. So I did have one other woman who decided to go public about it and sort of stand with me. But nothing really bad happened to him. His fiance ended their engagement because he was forced to tell her what was happening about the news going around, and she ended up walking away from the relationship, which I thought was great news. But there was certainly nothing legally happened to him. We didn't end up doing a protest or the interview because I panicked and thought, I don't want to be on the line for financial, him suing me.
Yeah.
So for libel or, something of that nature. And then when Me Too started up, I got really frustrated that all these people were doing sort of what I did. And I saw the end story was going to be that the guys are still not getting in trouble. Here we are, like, constantly telling what's going on and all these crimes being committed, and they're still out there in the world probably committing more rapes. So that's when I got the idea for my latest book. I decided that I wanted to rewrite the ending and write a story about a woman who goes after her rapist and manages to do everything I wish that we, like the collective we, could have done for ours. So
Great. What advice would you give to others who may be struggling in a similar situation, or who are victims?
The biggest thing I'm trying to get across right now, or what I would love to see change, is I'd like to see the secretive nature of sex assault end. I think that so much of the problems is these deep, dark secrets fester in us, and they get worse and more terrible with time and eat us up. And, people who drink too much, tend towards that, try to drink it away.
Mhm.
Basically, the healing process has been relatively simple. It's because I have talked and written so much about this. I literally have no emotional response. It does not get under my skin. I don't hate him. I don't have even ill will towards him. And I really do feel like I have forgiven him, because the definition in my mind is having let go of anger. I don't have anger about it. I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission to make people, and women in particular, understand that nothing bad is happening to me when I out him. Like, I have been doing this for years now, and only good has happened. First of all, I've healed. Like, I
Yeah.
feel 100% healed. It's just like in an AA meeting. Every time I talk about the darkness, I walk away feeling lighter. It's like I leave it on the table.
Because when you talk about it, you let go. The power it has over you is no longer
Yeah, and it's
there.
just my story. Might seem kind of horrific to some people, but it's my life, and everything I've been through has gotten me where I am right now, which is fabulous. I'm in a great place right now. And so I mean, the big thing is, I think there's a ton of fear and shame around talking about our assaults, but I don't want to try to, I'm not trying to blame victims, but if we don't talk about these situations, the guys who commit these crimes really do feel like they can get away with it. And that may or may not have been why the guy that assaulted me went on to be a serial rapist. I have no idea.
Mhm.
But who knows what would have happened if I had called the cops and outed him back then. It might have actually made a big difference for others. I don't know what it would have done to my life, but
Right.
it
It
could
could
have
have, but
prevented.
I mean, like many victims, you were, I'm sure you were. It sounds like you were obviously terrified, and you were also young.
I was young.
And
I was young. I think that's like the main component, honestly, because I've always been a pretty strong-willed person. I don't, let fear generally stand in my way, but I was wicked young. I just didn't even have the language. I didn't initially call it a rape because I didn't even understand the definition necessarily. I pretty quickly, as I became in my 20s, understood that's what had happened.
yeah.
But it was an immaturity thing. Yeah.
Do you feel like you fully healed?
100%. I mean,
Yeah.
listen, it's because of several things. I've talked about it with friends. I've talked about it, like any relationship I've ever been in, I had to talk about it because it was a big part of my sex life. Like, things could get in the way sometimes. That's long gone. Like, it's been so
Right.
long. It's not an issue anymore. But furthermore, like in 2/4 steps, I brought it up. I've done the steps
Mhm.
twice, and I've worked through it. I've
Oh, wait.
talked to.
We've got advice here for how to deal with this, which is and 7 things help you heal. Which was one was talking about it to your friends, then doing it sober, working the steps in the 4th step, and go ahead. I just want to be clear to our listeners so they get they get the good advice you're giving.
Yeah, it boils down to just talking and talking about it. I mean, whether or not it's writing a 4 step and then telling it to your sponsor or
Right.
whoever you choose to talk to, share your
Mhm.
4 step with. But yeah, I mean, I've taken the evil out of it. Like, the darkness is gone. Now it's just almost like talking about my grocery list when I speak about these things. And to some degree, I'm old enough now to understand that the things that I have gone through and survived, come out of okay, it has made me stronger. It makes me realize what I can handle, on some level. So I think bottom line is just talking about it, even if it's just to one person,
Mhm.
but really getting all the details out on the table and putting it out there so that it's not buried, I guess. I think the burying of thoughts and feelings are the worst thing for alcoholics in particular.
Right. Keeping secrets. We're on,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's what can do us. And I'm going to put a twist on our signature question that you ask almost all of our guests, since this is your second time being here. What's the best lesson you've learned while confronting your rapist, and how did it help you?
The best lesson I've learned is that this non-violent, in some ways, I'm doing a protest. By saying his name, it's me protesting what the law says that I can't do, which is to, accuse him without proof or whatever. So it's a protest to some degree. And
have you said his name?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I spoke at the library in our hometown, which I don't live there anymore. But last week I did, or I guess it was 2 weeks ago, I did a big author talk at our hometown library. And I said his name and I shared some screenshots actually of various things, including that first post that I made on Facebook, the original post, and a message that I sent him. Listen to this. 3 years before I outed him. And these were sort of the early days of Facebook. 3 years before that, he tried to friend me on Facebook. And before I blocked him, I sent him a piece of my mind. And I had screenshot that message that I sent, and I shared that. But the bottom line is, my point is, I'm not going to actually be intimidated by the fact that we're supposed to, not point fingers at people when we don't have literal proof. Because the proof I have is I'm telling the truth, and I've got all these other women who have, confided in me about their truths. There's no doubt in my mind that what he did was rape, and to many people. So I'm, just basically going to keep talking and not be afraid. Great. So I don't know. Now I forget what your original question was.
What's the best lesson you've learned while confronting your rapist, and how did it help you? Which I think is to keep talking and not be afraid.
Yeah, and it's nonviolent. It's like the pen is mightier than the sword. For so many years, I thought, what can I do to this guy? It was all filled with hate and like vindictiveness and revenge. And none of that would have healed me on any level. Like, what was that going to do? I never tried it, but basically what I have done instead, by just opening my mouth and sharing my truth and relating to others, or being relatable, that has healed me. And I think it's a pretty low level punishment for him, right? Just telling the truth. That's all I'm doing. It's not comfortable for him. I know that he's not doing well right now. And I know it's to some degree related to, on some level, it's related to this, but he's just not well. He's not a healthy person mentally. And he's kind of doing poorly now. But
you are doing great, and you are healthy. And so, yeah. And you have a new book out. So, and what's the name of that novel?
It is called Life of Sin, and Sin stands for Cynthia. So it's CYN.
Thank you. To all our listeners, thank you for your continued support. Visit us on soberpodcast.com and all places you get your podcast. Leave us a review, sign up for our mailing list. You'll also find contact information for Caitlin Avery in the show notes. I'm your host, Jamie Brickhouse. You can find me on TikTok every day, where I tell a true story wearing high heels at Jamie_Brickhouse, or also on Instagram and Facebook. Signing out from the Sober Podcast. Tune in for another show next week.